Bruxelles, je t'aime. Tu m'as fait manquer. Bruxelles, je t'aime. Bruxelles, je t'aime. Tu m'as préféré. Bruxelles, je t'aime. Bruxelles, je t'aime.
Hello there and welcome to Brussels, My Love, Euronews' weekly politics show with me, Maeve McMahon. For this edition, we're broadcasting from the European Parliament studios here in Strasbourg. So thank you so much for tuning in. Coming up this week, all eyes on the Middle East. Since Israel's surprise attack on Iran last week, there have been days of escalating violence, just as thousands of Europeans took to the streets last weekend to oppose Israel's war on Gaza. We're taking a closer look at the details of this latest full-scale war against two long-standing enemies and hear what role the European Union can play here to diffuse the situation. And to mark 50 years of relations, Brussels and Beijing are planning a big gathering this summer in China. With EU-US relations at a historic low and China-US ties rather turbulent, EU officials hope this summit, the first of its kind since late 2023, will be a win-win scenario. But with so many different interests at play, we're asking how the EU will balance economic gains with strategic autonomy and values. With our guests this weekend, Virginijus Sinkevičius, a Lithuanian politician, Green member of the European Parliament, Hanna Jalul-Muro, Spanish MEP with the Socialists, and Herbert Dorfmann, an Italian MEP with the European People's Party. Thank you so much. You're all very welcome. Great to have you with us. But before we bring in your views, as always, let's just tell our viewers what was the big topic under discussion this week in Strasbourg.
Fighting intensifies in the Middle East. Following the tit-for-tat missile strikes between Israel and Iran, the region is on high alert. Triggered by the Israeli attacks on Tehran's nuclear and military infrastructure, the situation has escalated at a time when the Trump administration was negotiating with Iran over its nuclear program. However, Israel is likely to have scuppered any prospect of a deal. Washington initially distanced itself from the action and warned Iran of retaliatory measures against US facilities. What happens now? Will the United States be dragged into a war that Trump does not want? Which side will the Arab states take? And can European diplomacy help to defuse the crisis?
So there you go, a very complex situation, and that's why an emergency debate was held this week here in Strasbourg. Hannah, what were the main conclusions drawn from that gathering here in the plenary in Strasbourg?
Well, what I think is that we need to differentiate two things when we talk about the conflicts in the Middle East. First of all is the war in Gaza. We cannot put our vision out of Gaza and what is happening there because of the conflict now between Israel and Iran. So we need to denounce the situation there, the daily deaths in Gaza. They need humanitarian aid get into Gaza, so we need to denounce this 100%, and the performance of the Israeli government in Gaza. But in the other hand, we need to work as European Union in lower the tensions, between Iran, Israel, and Iran, and de-escalate the conflict. It is true, and I would like to mention that security in the Middle East is one of the main concerns all the time, and Iran also poses, it's a very complicated scenario because, they have been supporting, Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis for the last years.
Deeply complex, and
so
that's why...
It's deeply complex. So we need to differentiate both conflicts, but our role is to de-escalate the conflict. Let's see what is the role of the Americans.
And for more details, in fact, for our viewers, we've been running live blogs every day since that war escalated last Friday. You talk about lowering tensions and the role of the European Union here. Virginijus, what role can the EU actually really play here?
The EU, as other countries also, you saw China's even later reaction than EU offering a diplomatic solution. But I'm not sure here, because if you look at those previous conflicts in the region when they had, Iran would launch some, attacks back and try to save face domestically, but then kind of negotiations would happen and conflict would be resolved. I'm not sure it's going to happen this time. I think Israel really wants to finalize with Iran threats in the region, because Iran was behind the terrorist organizations, supporting them. Yes, they now are weakened significantly, but still Iran was behind them. Iran is supplying Russia with Shahed drones that are hitting Ukrainian cities. And only now we saw a huge attack on Kiev, and it was mainly done with the Iranian drones. So here I see that the situation is not going to be resolved easily, because I think Israel has taken a decision. And the big question now is, of course, what could be the end of that? What could be the consequences? Because we see that, of course, Iran has invested heavily domestically to keep the power grip on its population. So any change of the regime is probably impossible.
And we're talking about, as you say, two long-standing enemies here. They've been getting ready for war, Mr. Dorfman, for decades. It feels like there are a few more dangerous global crises out there now. What is your view on the situation?
Well, I need to admit I'm concerned. And what concerns me most, if I look what's going on, is that long-standing international agreements are crashing down in just some weeks. And if you look a bit at the history of this continent, of the world, for example, the United Nations, they were created after the Second World War as an answer to what happened before. And the United Nations, other multilateral organizations are completely out of the game now. Even in the media, nobody in the media is going to ask what is the opinion of the United Nations on what's going on.
Yeah.
And this is really concerning. The whole multilateral system is crashing down.
That is a very pertinent question.
And with this,
is the UN still fit for purpose?
Not at all. And I think the role of the United States is changing completely. I mean, it's also responsibility of the US that the United Nations is such in a weak position. But all this creates an environment that I don't want to judge if this Israeli attack on Tehran makes sense, but it
and
is.
Mr. Sienkiewicz, you alluded to the fact that this is not going to be a short war. We could be going into a very long war here.
It will depend, of course, a lot on the US decision, but just to top up what has been said, I think, especially being from a small member state, when we see multilateralism failing, of course, for us it's difficult, because we entering those uncharted waters where the big powers are going to be splitting the world, and we hope, of course, that's not going to happen. But I think the issue here was that multilateralism was undermined so many times. You see UN Security Council, where Russia does its show every time when the question of Ukraine is put on the table. And I think that's a bit of an issue that we are arriving at the point, and this is what Trump has said many times, that he won't allow for others to cheat. And others, by those others, he means, first of all, of course, Iran, but he also means China. And I think this is a bit of an issue why the multilateralism is failing, because unfortunately, in some cases, it didn't deliver.
And is the UN, you think, perhaps too political?
Well, what I think is that also the UN is not playing the role it should have to play, because it has been diminished in purpose. So when you diminish UNRWA, when you diminish many of the agencies of the United Nations, then you are diminishing its role. So I think everybody's to blame here, and what we should do, and it has been mentioned by my colleagues here, is that the UN was created after the Second World War to strengthen, or reinforce with another name, because we have the Society of Nations before, a continuation to give it an important role. We need multilateral organizations to work. We need help in this kind of conflicts, and of course UN can play a very important role here, but it has been attacked. The international system is consistently being attacked for more than a year.
And needs to be protected by its very own member states. But what do you think were the causes of this war there that broke out last Friday?
The conflict in the Middle East is not a new one, and unfortunately there are years or decades of frictions behind this, and this is also the danger of this conflict, because both are prepared and both have arms, and I don't think that this conflict will end very soon, because both are prepared. And I mean, it is clear, and this we need to be clear, and there was a missing cooperation of Tehran on the nuclear program.
And of course, President Trump previously pulled the Americans out of the Iran nuclear deal that, of course, took years to bring about. And our former High Representative played a big role there. But I'd like to bring in now another view. We had a chat with a Middle East expert called Lina Aburus, and we asked her how long she thinks this war could last. Take a listen.
It's not going to be a short conflict, that's for sure. In the mind of the Israelis, this is something that they've been calling President Netanyahu since 1992, that Iran is developing a nuclear, it's becoming a nuclear power. In the mind of the Israelis, they will not go back. In the mind of the Iranians, this is a kind of we're defending ourselves. So, and both, there is no logic. The impact on Europe, we will start immediately, I believe, with the maritime security, with the securing the investments of Europe in the region. I mean, it's a very integrated region. My 2 cents for all our institutions and our leaders is not to be happy with a few tweets and few declarations and statements, and get on the table, make a clear initiative, try to bring everybody back on the table.
And that was Lina Aburus there from the international risk management company Forward Global. Very critical of EU leaders just for putting out a few tweets and thinking that was sufficient, and calling on the Europeans to get around the table there.
Well, you know, it's going to be difficult to get everyone at the table, because Iran was very open why they needed to develop their nuclear program, why they need to strengthen their capabilities to destroy Israel. To destroy Israel and United States, and they were saying it out loud all the time. So I mean, it's what has been said that Israeli population, they've really seen this as a threat number one, and now.
So do you support this attack?
When the operation was prepared, Israel struck. Well,
do you support it?
I cannot say, you know. I always will say that, you know, we need to find ways to have a peaceful resolution. But I think non-cooperation of Iran in this case didn't help. Constant threatening of Israel didn't help. And, of course, Iran supporting other conflicts, supporting terrorist organizations didn't help. I would love that we would find a diplomatic solution, but I think it's, unfortunately, too late.
What about the EPP group, the European People's Party? Do you support what Israel did last Friday? Operation Lion.
Well, the EPP always underlined the right of Israel to exist and the right to defend this existence. And I fully agree, my colleague. I mean, we know the situation of Israel in the region. There are a lot of enemies around Israel, and there are decades they have been attacked by Hamas, by Hezbollah, and by Iran, which is behind mainly Hezbollah. So it is clear that there's a right of Israel to defend itself. But at the same time...
at the same time, you've got 10 million Tehranis who've been told to leave, but where should they go, Hannah?
Well, I think that we are obliged to lower the tensions here, because civilians are dying, and as you saw also, you know, the ballistic missiles of Iran are penetrating, you know, the shields in Israel, and we have their civilians that have died. So we need to protect life. This is first of all. And as my colleague said, I mean, the issue is that you cannot jump always over international law. Invading a country like this, you know, it's something that before that happens, we need to all understand and coordinate together in order because these things cannot be done. But in the other hand, I am agreeing with my colleagues the issue and the fact that Iran, you know, has been really a danger for the last, you know, 20 years in Syria, you know, with Hezbollah, Hamas. So this is something that we all need to address and understand. Security is understood in different way in the Middle East and in the rest of the continents, or in Europe. Many people in Europe do not really understand how security is one of the main issues and preoccupations of people. So I think that we are obliged to de-escalate the conflict.
And that's why we saw this week the High Representative Kaja Kallas from Estonia. She was in the plenary here discussing the situation, and she was also warning against the United States getting involved, saying that that would definitely drag, she said, the entire Middle East into a wider, more dangerous conflict. Do you agree?
Absolutely. I truly hope that US will take a decision to stay out of it and actually will take a leadership to facilitate an agreement between the two. Clearly that now Israel has an upper hand in this situation.
And it has the support. I saw 80% of Israelis support Netanyahu.
But this is what I said, that you cannot expect society not to be behind Netanyahu when Iran was all the time claiming on their national television, their politicians, that their goal is to have the capabilities to destroy Israel. That's a very serious threat, and they've been set multiple times.
Whereas the Tehranis, Iranis, they didn't sign up for this war. They were kind of pulled into it or dragged into it.
Yeah, clear. I fully agree. I fully understand the situation in Israel. But on the other side, on the Iran conflict, but also on the Palestine conflict, we always need to have at least a vision, and the vision, at least for my political group, was always to have a two-state solution on the ground. And I think we are going more and more far away from this. And I see also that Israel, before the attack of Hamas, worked on a diplomatic way. So, for example, they tried to get closer to Saudi Arabia and to create a security shield, let's say, against Iran in a diplomatic way in the region. And this disappeared completely since the attack of Hamas and all what happened in the last 20 months.
And you mentioned earlier Gaza, of course, the plight of Gazans. We saw more apocalyptic pictures this week of the Israelis shooting on Palestinians as they were lining up for food. Has the plight of the situation and the people of Gaza now been overshadowed because of the latest war between Iran and Israel?
It's not some news are putting in the headlines, but it's being forgotten. And I think that nothing can and should overshadow what is going on in Gaza.
So what should be done? Because we saw discussions this week on the EU-Israel Association Agreement, the trade pact that was signed back in '95, that came in 2000 to improve ties between the EU and Israel. Should it be suspended or revised, in your view?
I think we should revise the agreement, and it's based on Article 2. This is an article that we have been agreed to. It's within the agreement, and it is fair enough to do it through Article 2 in human rights. We need to keep denouncing illegal settlements. 2 weeks ago, the government of Netanyahu have approved 20 new illegal settlements in the West Bank. It's something that did not happen in the last 30 years. So we need to battle the illegal settlements. We need to take the resolutions of the ICC and the ICJ. We have these institutions that we gave to ourselves, in order to battle injustice.
And what about the EPP group's view here on the association agreement? It feels like the only tool the EU really has to have leverage over the government of Benjamin Netanyahu.
No, we are not in favor to suspend the agreement, and I think this doesn't make sense in this moment. We need to further work on diplomatic
That's not working.
basis.
What makes sense to do now to get through to Benjamin Netanyahu? Because actually Israelis do not support the war in Gaza, whereas they support the war in Iran, a long-standing enemy. They do not support, and we've seen protests for months over in Tel Aviv as well, people saying, Netanyahu, stop.
Yeah.
No. I personally think we should also, and this is sometimes a bit a problem in politics, that we always mix, let's say, criticism to a government with criticism towards a state. And these are two completely different things. I think to be critical with the Netanyahu government doesn't mean that somebody's against Israel. That are two completely different things. And because a state is not, the president of a state is not a state.
Yeah. Regardless of that, diplomacy is not working, Virginius. And it's 20 months now into the war.
So here exactly we have to separate the two, and in Gaza, Israel has to prove and show that it's the part of the West and of course the respect to human rights, respect to people living in Gaza is utmost importance. But I'm not sure that suspending agreement would really bring the desired result, because we're basically cutting the bridge, and then we have very little of the leverage. There is an article in agreement which is very clear, which actually states about the respect to human rights. We should use this article. We should, of course, look for the ways how to find a way to appeal to Israel as regards the humanitarian support to Gaza. United States has to play a role here as well, because, of course, I think all groups and the parliament in Europe in general, we agree on two-state solution. Gaza without Hamas has to have a future, and Israel has to act as a part of the West. Unfortunately, it's been failing that.
It's been failing that, and that's why we saw last weekend so many people take to the streets here in Europe and in the Netherlands as well, thousands and thousands of people. Just a final thought, perhaps, our viewers who are concerned tuning in this weekend and seeing this wider conflict in the Middle East, it's already impacting us here in Europe. We've seen oil prices increase, we've seen flights disrupted. Yeah. How else will it hit people here in the EU?
Well, what I think is that we are losing hope on diplomacy. People are waiting for our member state, our leaders at this parliament, to take some very clear decision on what is going on in the Middle East. We need to be very firm, and people are complaining, and we are not listening to them. And this is something, as you just said now, the flags, and the people go on strikes, demonstrations, things like this. We are not really listening for what people want. People want the end of the war. People who want to stay solution, deployment of the 67 borders on the part of Israel, ending illegal settlements, and two-state solutions and peace and security. It's not that difficult. Ending occupation will bring all that.
OK, and on that point, we can bring this conversation about the Iran-Israel war to an end. Thank you so much to our guests for joining us, and thank you so much for watching. And if, by the way, you speak Persian, Euronews Persia just launched on TV this week, so keep an eye out for that. But for now, stay with us, as shortly we'll be back with you here in Strasbourg, diving into another important topic, and that is EU-China relations. See you soon. Welcome back to Brussels, my love. I'm Maeve McMahon in Strasbourg, and along with my panel of MEPs, we're just taking a look back at the news of the week. And one we wanted to dwell in was this: the upcoming EU-China summit taking place at the end of July. Now that the Americans and Chinese have reached an agreement after months of trade spats, all eyes are on EU-China trade ties. So what expectations do you have for this summit taking place at the end of July?
Well, I actually think China is an important trade partner for the European Union. Even we have a huge trade deficit with China, and the trade deficit is increasing. So I think on one side we are aware that this is an important partner, that we need a free market, but that this market needs to be also fair. And I think the problem is there, that we have the impression that it is not always fair. And on this, I think we need a clear agreement with China. We don't want to go to act as the United States did. This is not our way to act, but we need to be clear with China. If we want to go on...
Hannah, what is your view? Is China a friend or a foe of the European Union?
I think we don't have to see everything in black and white. I think China is essential and a strategic partner for us. I think in this we need to be intelligent and have leadership with our relationship with China. And, there has always been this confrontation between China and the US. We don't have to be there or in the middle. We are just the European Union. Let's take our own decisions.
Let's be a little bit more boring, perhaps.
Yeah, see. And I think that we need to have leadership in this and set our own rules and our relationship with China. I agree on what you said also on the fair issues related to labor, trade. Yeah, we're working on that. We would like to relaunch conversation on, on investment agreements or things like this, on issues that were stopped in the past. But I think it's important. We have now, the tariffs we put for the electric vehicles, 38%, because we were unhappy with some issues. But I think all of this can be renegotiated and taken into account that we need to work with China, and this is important.
We need a fair deal, I would say. Fair conditions working with China. But I think it's critically important for us to find a balance in this partnership, ensuring, of course, that we don't push China further towards Russia, because, of course, if they support, even so they're denying that, but their support as regards the Russia's war in Ukraine is critical to ensure that China is not supporting. Secondly, when you look at some of our sectors, for example, like automotive sector, Chinese market is critically important, chemicals and etc. But also for the critical raw materials, if you look into digital, green transitions, some of the critical raw materials are in Chinese hands, and we need to ensure that we have a stable
but how do you ensure?
but
because
fair relationship.
We also saw at the G7 this week, Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission President, she said she's worried about a new China shock. She slammed their, quote, pattern of dominance, dependency and blackmail towards trading partners. She's taking a bit of a Trump tone here, Ursula von der Leyen, is she?
She's been tough, but I think that when you negotiate, you need to be tough. There are things we cannot go through, and I think human rights and fair labor and fair rights, and I think it's something that we need this compliance to be done in order, if we want to have fair deals with them. This is why we put these tariffs on the 38% of the vehicles, for example, you know, because we were not happy with some unfair deals that they were doing.
Yeah.
But I think it's part of the negotiations. I think yet we have to be tough in some issues, but again, we need to relaunch this agreement, you know, on investment, judiciary reforms, and labor reforms, all these kind of things that will make us closer, you know, in our way of thinking to them.
We can bring in now Yang Li. He's a Chinese lawyer and a former diplomat. He works in Brussels for the Institute for China-Europe Studies, and we asked him what his expectations for this EU-China summit are. Take a look.
I will see this event as an opportunity to not resetting the relationship, but refreshing. There will be no major breakthrough in the sense that the fundamental aspects of the relationship will not change. The major concern from the European side is the trade imbalance and overcapacity, things like that. And the China side, they are concerning about the de-risking policies of the European side and the defense trade tools, which applied by the European side on Chinese business, which is perceived to be protectionist. So I think these differences will not be bridged very soon. I think they're friends with some disagreements and misunderstandings. I think the reason is that both sides need each other.
That's Yang Li there saying that, in his view, China and the EU deeply need each other. And Herbert Dorfmann, the MEP joining us today, you're also on the European Parliament China Committee. How are relations doing? Because we know that China did lift those sanctions imposed a couple of months ago on several MEPs. There was a number of sanctions and they've actually lifted them. Is that a step in the right direction? And how are the relations now?
Well, the relations are for sure not easy, and also not easy because I think there's a fundamental problem. We had China was a very important export destination for our goods for many years in the last decades, and we have to admit the Chinese have been very brave. We didn't believe some years ago that Chinese will develop high technology, will produce
so many cars
which are at least at our level. This happened, and this is a new situation. With this new situation, we need to deal. But in this situation, it's even more important that we have common rules, because if we do not have common rules, and if we do not have the acknowledgement of the Chinese government that now we are playing on a level playing field. So we need, if we want to go on to have trade, and we want to go on, because I think it's important for the European Union to have trade with China. It's a big economy.
And that's the word we hear all the time here, level playing field in Strasbourg and Brussels, but perhaps it's not so well known in Beijing. And we did hear as well this week at the G7 Ursula von der Leyen slamming and blasting China for flooding global markets with subsidised overcapacity that the market cannot absorb.
Well, that's exactly the case. And I think nothing wrong is putting a message across to your partner, even when the relations may be tense, but you have to say it very clear that access to our market is privilege. And to get that privilege, you have to oblige to by the same rules as our companies does. We are not asking Chinese companies to go extra mile. We're asking them the same rules that we're asking our companies to do. Our companies are not state subsidized. So I think that's a bit of the main message that is being put across. But
and we'll keep a close eye on that and keep our viewers well informed on that summit taking place in July. But for now, we can leave it there and stay with us, though, here on Euronews. Thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you so much to our MEPs as well for being with us. See you soon on Euronews. Hi there and welcome to Brussels, My Love, our weekly politics show that draws on the highs and, of course, lows of the European Union. I'm Maeve McMahon, coming to you from Strasbourg, where I'm joined by the MEPs Virginia Sinkevičius, Hanna Jalloul-Muro and Herbert Dorfmann. Now, this week, MEPs focused mostly on the ongoing situation in Gaza and the escalating war between Israel and Iran, but we'll come to that later, because first, another topic that came up on the sidelines here was the impact of phone usage and social media on Europe's youth. Following Australia, France now wants to ban social media for under 15s. French President Macron is worried about both online radicalisation and a looming anxiety and mental health crisis. In an interview with France 2, he said, "We need to ban social media sites for under 15-year-olds. It will give us a few months to mobilise Europe, and otherwise I'll be negotiating with the Europeans to see if we can start doing it in France." So, Mr. Dorfmann, what is your take? Should we ban social media just like cigarettes and alcohol are banned for the under 15s?
Well, good luck. I think if I'm looking to youngsters, I think it will be quite complicated to ban the use of phones. And honestly, I think we should also ask ourselves, what is the role of the state? So it's really up to the state to say to parents what they should do. And I need to say, I go to restaurants, I go to into the plane, and I see parents giving the phone to 3 or 4-year-old kids only that they stay quiet so the parents can eat and are not bothered by their kids, and the same in the plane. What? So really, it's this really a thing the state should do, or is it a question of education?
So
I think phones, and I fully understand the problem, but
you said it's a question of education. That's interesting, because we had a chat with an expert on this topic and a well-known psychologist, author and TED talker, Dr. Elke Gerards, and she shares your opinion. Let's take a listen.
It's naive to assume that if you provide an iPad or a different screen to your toddler, that it would not have an impact on their brain. And it would be naive to assume that if you never let them play in beautiful playgrounds like this anymore, that it's having an impact on how they can estimate risks, how they can socially develop in playing with people in the real world. But at the same time, I feel like a full ban, like the plans are with Macron, is that it is pushing risks to the underground, because social media is part of youngsters' world, and instead of exclusion, I think it's better to educate people about it.
So there you go, the view of Dr. Elke Gerards. And it's good to remind our viewers why President Macron has floated this idea. It's due to that horrific incident last week where a 14-year-old pupil killed a 31-year-old teacher at a secondary school in eastern France. He's worried that that child was radicalised online.
But that's exactly the case. I think it's not about banning phones. It's banning use of social media, where, for example, you as a media channel, you have very strict restrictions. If you now start showing violence, nudity, and etc., you would be straight away under the fines and bans. Social media is a free-flowing water. Yeah. And that's the biggest issue, that those algorithms, they even encouraging youth to do crazy things, violent things, to collect more likes, to become even more popular. And I think this is a very important thought what was put forward. The question is, of course, always how you're going to implement it. But in any case, I think we must ask for a much bigger responsibility from the social media companies, because for them,
we do have our Digital Services Act, etc. What's your view on this idea of a ban?
We need age verification system, and we have it. Like for adults in Spain and France, also we are introducing this age verification system for adults' webs. And this is important. There are things that need to be banned for children, you know. And the issue is that education is very important. We need safe environment, you know, digital safe environment for children. And I think we need to talk about a common age, maybe. you know.
But when it
But
comes
is
to
true-
education, if you look across many EU countries, education is so under-resourced. Teachers are not paid enough, they don't have the resources.
But age verification system for some issues, I think this should be introduced, you know, and we have established things with the Digital Act, but we need to stress on that, you know, try to manage how kids can go into some context without, you know, eliminating their digital rights too. We need an equilibrium there. But
And do you think better education would have stopped that incident that took place last week in France?
I don't know. But I fully agree, we need age verification, but this is not only about social media, this is also about porn content and others. But I personally think, and I say this as a father of two kids, they are not kids anymore.
Teenagers?
Till they are 15, maybe you have a chance to educate. From 15 onwards, the difficult age starts, because they're out of your control. You are not able to control them anymore. So it's okay. So then we introduce a ban till 15, and then they can do what they want. I don't think that this solves the problem. I think that the critical age is unfortunately later on, and this we will not solve with.
And parents also need education on how to monitor the usage.
Absolutely. But that's the thing. I don't know if it's up for a challenge for education. I remember myself growing when, you know, the internet just came into place and using the computer. So, you know, different things you could apply. Now with social media, it's such a free flowing waters.
And AI as well, generative AI.
Absolutely, you can educate kids and say what's good and what's wrong, but when it's basically comes at you, and as I said, the whole purpose of the social media is to keep you there for as long as possible. And they tap into all that, you know, worst things that are on people's minds, and they literally don't care. So I think this is first of all.
See, they put the algorithms, they control your what you like, they put all the contents you want to see, as you were mentioning, and that you would like. We need to have some kind of control on this. I think that parents should be also on the contents their kids are on, and this is part of the responsibility of the education, not only in the schools, you know, and the educational centers, but also on us. And this is why web verifications, you know, digital verification age is super important. But I think that, as it was said by the specialists, you know, ban everything is not possible because you have a part of the social media. It's very necessary.
Of course, and I mean, young people, you get around a ban, probably. But on that conclusion, we can bring this edition to an end. Thank you so much to our guest, Virginia Sinkovich from the Greens, for being with us, for Hannah Jalul Muro, Spanish MEP with the Socialists, and also Herbert Dorfmann, Italian MEP with the centre-right EPP. Thanks for being here. And thank you so much for watching it. As always, you can reach out to Brussels, my love, at Euronews.com if you have a comment. From Brazil to Dubai, we love hearing from you and getting those messages. So keep them coming. And thank you so much for watching. We'll see you very soon on Euronews.